Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we'll be taking a look at a variety of D&D and old school RPG zines that have been sent to me over the last year or two. I get sent these things all the time. I have a big shelf of them, but frankly, they're often too short to really dedicate a full review to. So today I thought I would grab 5, a big handful of them, and we'll go through them to see what they have to offer. Before we do, though, a shout out to my patrons over on Patreon for suggesting this video. New patrons will be getting a shout out at the end, as well as our sponsor for today, which is Infinite Black and their series of Elder Dice. So these dice come in a variety of Lovecraft themes. This one is, of course, Cthulhu themed, and they're all in these little evil books as their dice boxes. You can stack them on your shelf, and it looks like you have evil tomes full of dice, which is really neat. Open them up with a little magnetic clasp here. And inside there's a lot of cool interior art, and you can see the dice here. These ones are green themed. They have a slightly translucent look to them with the gold printed numbers. And on the highest value side, they have the symbol that is unique to this set, including this little Cthulhu tentacly guy, which makes sense. Each of these have different symbols that go along with them. You can see the symbol on the cover there. They also have sets of D6s that come in these tubes if you have a more D6 themed system that you happen to be using. If you head to the link down in the description below, you can get stuff at their store 10% off as a reward for being a Questing Beast subscriber. So go down there and check that out. And thanks to Infinite Black for sponsoring this video. All right, let's take a look at our first zine for today, which is going to be Mangrels Ate My Servants. So it has a great cover. It's extremely vibrant looking. It's all done in a staple bound format, as is all of these, I believe. And it's all done by Fiona Geist. Now, at first I thought this was just a separate adventure that stood alone, but on the inside, this is also Phantasmagoria issue number 3. And for people who have been following the channel for a while, you'll know that I have been making reviews of previous issues of this series. Which is created by Chance Phillips. It looks like this one, though, has been all guest written by Fiona Geist. This is designed as a funnel for Dungeon Crawl Classics, but done in a sci-fi theme, which is fleshed out in some of the previous issues. This is a funnel, which means that the idea is that each player starts out with a handful, usually 4, very weak level 0 PCs, and they all go through this adventure. So you could have up to 16 PCs running at once. And most of them are going to die, but hopefully some of them make it out alive, and those can graduate to becoming level 1 characters. So these funnel adventures are often very gonzo, very deadly, and they're just a lot of fun to see who's going to survive and come out on the other end. So our general situation here is that we have a wizard whose tower has been crashed into by a spacecraft. So a spacecraft, the Macbeth Sorrow, came screaming like a kettle into the atmosphere, flying erratically as a drunken chicken before graciously crashing into the tower of Serafina von Elric, famed producer of synthetic servants. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why you might want to get involved here, because there's a whole bunch of factions running around inside of this wizard complex now. You have the Mangrels that were in charge of this spaceship. You have the synthetic servants that are in there. There's other servants that may or may not be synthetic, not entirely clear. There is an evil plant-like being that is assimilating everything. So all of this stuff is going on inside this setting, and you are there to hopefully make the best of it and get out with some loot, and have not too many of your characters die. The different inhabitants are broken up by faction here. So we have the upper floor inhabitants, the house servants, which all have particular names here, and write-ups. There's some really great pieces of art here. There's a number of artists. I think this one, let's see, it's on page 6. So this one was done by Penny Malagareo. Hopefully I'm not butchering that too badly. But this is a really nice piece of art, and there's a lot of variety in here as well. Some of the characters have been infected. You'll have to deal with them. And you have the stranded Mangrels that have some psychic abilities, which can go horribly wrong and cause their heads to explode. We have the tower. And what's a little bit unfortunate is that we start describing the tower and the ground floor and what's in there before we even really see a map. And for a little while I was looking for a map. Usually it's at the beginning, and sometimes it's at the end, but it was kind of sort of in the middle. It's like right here, which is probably not the best place to put it. You usually want to put it somewhere really prominent, so it's very easy to flip back to it. but it is near the beginning of the actual room descriptions. The ground floor, the basement, the second floor, and the penthouse where our wizard actually hangs out. One little thing that could be used to improve this is just writing the names of the rooms on the rooms. Right now, they're all just letters and numbers, which means you have to flip back and forth just to know what the room is for. There's plenty of room here. You could easily add those room names in there, and I think they should do that. Most of the rooms don't have a whole lot to really investigate. There's just, some things there. For example, there could be a grand entryway or display room, pristinely maintained, dimly lit, imitation marble floors, and in corners a toggle switch which illuminates the room brightly. 8 inactive synthetic servants are on display, cross-section between sheets of glass and in demonstrative poses. So there's often great descriptions. There's cool things to look at, but the rooms aren't super interactive usually. The interactivity from what I saw comes mostly from your random encounters. So this can be any of your multiple factions running around and already interacting with the other factions. So you'll be caught in the crossfire of what all of these different groups want. And I suppose that's where most of the adventure is going to come in. Let's flip forward a little bit here. We have a Conan the Barbarian type dude there. The wizard, if she gets annoyed or stressed out, will tend to just turn bearers of bad news into frogs. So there is a whole bunch of frogs hopping around this setting that are previous servants that displeased her. Rolled up to the penthouse. Oh, so we have a great piece of art here by Alex Sorensen, as I think his name. So that's, page 27? Yeah, Alex Sorensen, who did work on the Stygian Library and on Electric Bastion Land as well. So it's cool to see his work showing up more and more. At the end, we have a number of character sheets. These are very short because they're designed for level 0 characters who probably don't have a whole lot in terms of game statistics going for them. And then we have some more encounters on the back. It's nice that the encounters were on the front and back because that does make them easy to reference. Probably the map should have been easier to find though. Let's take a look at what else we get here. What's our next book? Down Out in Dredgeburg. What's going on here? So this looks like art by Skullfungus, who does a lot of old school maps. If you've watched my channel for a while, you've probably seen many maps and illustrations done by him. But it looks like he's creating his own little setting here, which is a fantasy city set in hell or perhaps just the underworld. If your characters die, you can drop them down into Dredgeburg and continue the adventure from there. One thing I point out right away, this font is really small. It is still readable, but it is very tiny. Maybe about 2 points larger would have been helpful, I think. We start off with just a description of what Dredgeburg is this underworld city. You end up there when you're dead. You start out on the Bone Barge, just traveling down the river to Dredgeburg, and there's some encounters along the way. The assumed system, I wasn't sure what the system was at first, and I had to look it up on the front, but the assumed system is World of Dungeons, which is a hyper-minimalist version of Dungeon World. And I've played World of Dungeons actually quite a bit, and I like it. It's very fast, it's very easy. There is some tweaks made to the system here. The main thing that I'm not a fan of in the Dungeon World system is the way that you're always asking players for world building information. Like, what is actually going on here? Or tell me why this place is creepy and stuff like that. Which isn't a big deal, but I don't like having to add my own descriptions to things that I'm exploring. I'd rather the DM do that, but that's very easy to just take out. It's not really mechanized in any meaningful way. We have some passengers you can meet on the Bone Barge. For example, Hazel, an imp smuggler and on the run. Each of these has a description. Crow's head with stubby horns, small bat wings, wears cargo shorts and suspenders. Wants to continue her smuggling operation while avoiding both the authorities and anyone else trying to steal her packaged goods. Manner, head twitches like a bird. And ask, despite her monstrous appearance, what's something truly human about her? See, so that's an example of adding information to the world building. Apart from those little bits, all of the descriptions and the little bits of information that it gives you are really good and very gameable. And you get a very vivid picture right off the bat, and I like that. City overview. So this is a kind of an abstract picture of what Dredgeburg looks like. You have the Green Blight, Judgment, the Throne, the Tomb, the Dusk and Dawn Market, and the Gutter are different zones. We have some truths about Dredgeburg, some questions so players can add their own information. Local color and impressions. This is really great because if you're wandering around, you can simply grab a few of these and have something to say to players. For example, a street market, people haggling over wares, the smell of food. Or ladders, support structures, rope bridges all over. Once we go into the actual book, we have each of these districts is given more detail. And each of them has questions for the player characters. Impressions, so the gutter has things like a narrow passage covered in mushrooms and spores, or a beggar king whispering to his young disciples. We have some NPCs, and then some locations there to flesh it out a bit if you want a concrete place. Although it is pretty short, this is just a zine after all. You would have to flesh it out more to really run it. It could be something like the shanties, homes underneath the docks, which has a description. It has wants, like to provide shelter for those in need, and a manor, people hunched over, scurrying past like rats. What's interesting is that it has wants and manor just like NPCs have. So it adds this kind of person-like quality to the locations. The Dawn and the Dusk Market, the Tomb, which is dusty shelves, echoing hallways, ancient relics, and twisted specimens. The tomb truly is the domain of the undead. Here they work tirelessly on studying obscure tomes, forbidden scrolls, and maddening rites. The Green Blight, Judgment, the Throne. The Throne is the fancy area. It's the highest situated district in the whole city, where the upper class can literally look down on the rest of the city. So locations could be the Purple Room or the Papaver Gardens, a poisonous park. A person might be Althazar, an eccentric inventor, who wants to find a new crew willing to test drive the experimental Golden Bat, a prototype flying vessel, and possible death trap. How to make your character. This is basically World of Dungeon rules. So you'll be rolling 2d6 for all of your moves. For any time you want to try and do something, you're trying to get a 7 through 9 as a mixed success. 10 or higher means a full success. And it's very freeform. It's much less regimented than a standard Powered by the Apocalypse game, which I liked about it because there's just more room for DM improvisation. Your 3 stats are Brawn, Move, and Weird. And you have your basic rules here. Armor subtracts damage. You have some equipment you can get. A mission and idea generator. This is really great. If you're going to be running a city adventure, you're going to need a lot of stuff to work with. So different people that you can run into. Roll up some mission types. For example, switching out or kidnapping or killing. And then you could roll a character to combine with that. Or you could roll a location that you have to go to easily make a mission that way. Complications that go along with the missions. That's good. Some names and quirks for NPCs. For example, Dobrek Grix. I would just combine 2 of them to make a full name. Quirk or description like covered in dust or barks when excited. And we have some sample little maps if you want to create little dungeons. Although it's of dubious usefulness since they're pretty basic, but they are fun to look at. And some monsters and other NPCs at the back, along with a whole bunch of NPC powers to make them a little bit more dangerous or interesting. So, seems like it would work really well. If your characters died and you wanted a little detour in the underworld, you could just pull out Dredgeburg, float on into the city, and see what's there. Next up, we have Cairn. This is, I believe, a mashup of my own game Knave and Into the Odd. So let's see how it does that. Comes with a little character sheet here. It's a really nice looking character sheet. I love the illustrations here. So Strength, Dex, and Will, those are the stats from Into the Odd. So it's an Into the Odd system, but I think it adds some Knave stuff on top of that. We start off with some information about what kind of game it is. It is classless. Death is a real possibility. How you can grow, what principles you're using. That's really nice, especially if you're an experienced role player. You can look at this and quickly get a sense of what it is that you're looking at. Principles for wardens and players. This is really nice. This is basically similar to what we see in my game Maze Rats, where I try and break down a lot of OSR principles and advice into bullet points, into short little things people can absorb. So this is really great. If you've never been exposed to the old school mindset before, this will get you up to speed pretty quickly. For example, danger. The game world produces real risk of pain and death for the player characters. You should telegraph serious danger to players when it's present. The more dangerous, the more obvious. Put traps in plain sight. A lot of standard OSR advice. How to create your character. This is Into the Odd style character creation. You can roll a name and background right here. You're going to roll 3d6 for your 3 stats, strength, dexterity, and will. And it's going to be roll under, I believe, with a d20 in order to succeed at things. We have starting gear. Looks like this stuff is taken from Knave. Character traits you can roll up to if you want more flavor for your character. And some spell books. So these spells also look like the spells that I wrote for Knave. We have equipment that you can actually buy here if you want to. Or there's also gear packages, which is a very Into the Odd system. If you want to just grab and go, you want to be a cleric or a dwarf or an elf, boom, here's the stuff that you start with. Our rules are the standard Into the Odd rules, it looks like. There might be some slight differences there. Casting spells, though, looks like it is based on Knave, so it really is a mashup of these systems, where you have a number of spell slots or physical slots of things that you can carry, equipment slots. And spell books tend to take up a whole slot. You have to hold them in 2 hands, and then you can cast off of them. But casting can cause fatigue to fill up slots in your inventory, which is really neat. The more spells that you're casting, the wearier you get, so you can carry less stuff, basically. Combat is done with just rolling damage dice directly, without 2 hit rolls. And then you just subtract armor from that. And we have a number of scars that can happen to you. If you get rolled down to 0 hit points exactly, then you can get a scar that's going to linger with you. Some monster ideas for creating monsters, the 100 spells. Yeah, these mostly look like they're out of Knave. A few of these are different, like bait flower. A plant sprouts from the ground that emanates the smell of decaying flesh. That's definitely not one that I wrote. So there's definitely been some tweaks here, which is cool. And we have our character sheet at the back again, and a rule summary. So that's pretty basic, but if you like Into the Odd and you like Knave, this could be a good way to combine them. What do we have next here? We have Beyond the Borderlands, issue number 1 by @Gnarled Monster. This little thing here. Comes with a little map. That's fun. Editorial. So I looked at this editorial I looked it over ahead of time, and basically this is a attempt to make the Keep on the Borderlands, which is a classic D&D module, a little bit more interesting, maybe spruce it up a bit, make it a bit easier to run. Any changes that it has made, I'm not going to be totally sure about. I have not actually read or played Keep on the Borderlands, so I'll have to kind of take this as it is. The Strong Law Keep. So I love this isometric view. It's very toyetic. It feels like you can tell how tall everything is, how far things are apart from each other. It feels like a playset where you put little miniatures on it and you'd move it around. All the different locations have a brief write-up. The gatehouse, the common stables, the tavern. This place is the core of the keep. Everyone that lives in the outer bailey comes here to have their meals and drinks. The barkeeper is the bailiff's older brother. Some loot and stuff. You can try and steal things, but as you steal things, people get more suspicious, then eventually they might start coming after you. Interesting. I like how it seems to break down the different locations by what there is to steal in there. Yeah, so if you're really thief or thieving oriented, then that would make things a lot easier. All right, so we got a Hex Crawl here. And I believe the castle itself is right here. The Stronglaw Keep is on 1-3. I guess 1, you look at this first, and then 3 to find the keep. And we have a number of different regions here that are color-coded. So we have some rules for traveling in time between hexes, getting lost when the group travels at night or decides to go through dense forestation. They have a chance to go in the wrong direction. Make a deviation roll to see where they go. Do not tell them they've gone off course. So I guess this is the deviation roll right here, where you roll the die and whatever you roll tells you what direction you're going in. It looks like you're always going to get lost if you go into a dense forest. It seems a little weird that there's no chance of that not happening. Maybe make players make a wisdom roll or something to see if they actually get lost. We have some of our basic hex crawling rules like reaction rolls. And we have a more detailed write-up of each hex, which is nice. So the keep's domains, this area around here is first. And we have encounters and rumors for each of these regions. So rumors might be things like dark secrets lurk underground below the Stronglaw Keep, or the hunting camp is hiring. And a hex description might be something like, this place is heavily fortified and you can't see much further than a few steps. You can only see trees and tiny rays of diffused sunshine here and there. So there's a little italicized description you can read out loud, though you might want to just riff off of it. An old spell of confusion affects this place. Make a deviation roll every time someone enters this hex. If players rest here, they will hear a ghostly voice calling for their aid. They won't be able to locate the source of the voice unless they come from the hex to 5. I guess that's off of this hex. A direction where the confusion spell doesn't work. The voice comes from the sword. It tries to convince people to pull it from the rock. Doing so will free a chaos spirit. So it looks like something interesting and gameable has been placed in most of these hexes. The hunting groves, the dusky woods, the sludgy bog, and the rockfall range, and the scarlet forest. So there's 2 more of these zines in the works, it looks like, fleshing out more stuff. So one is going to focus on dungeons, including all 6 dungeons from the Caves of Chaos, which I think is another classic TSR module. And issue 3 is going to be a bestiary. But it looks like the author's working with Jacob Hurst from Swordfish Islands to create a future hardcover once all 3 issues are done. That's neat. I should probably check out the actual original module at some point, since everyone seems to know what that is. I think it was the module that originally came with basic Dungeons & Dragons, if I remember correctly. And so everyone who started out playing basic D&D got that module. So it's just a very played adventure. Lastly, what do we have here? Rogueland. Comes with some little handouts here. I believe this is another take on my game Knave. Yeah, it has slot-based encumbrance here. It has your inventory. It has some usage dice. It has your basic D&D stats. We have, what do we got here? Oh, a kind of fold-out character sheet. And then on the back, we have a rules summary. That's pretty useful, especially if you have a new player. Let's see what it looks like inside. It's heavily inspired by some of the greatest tabletop role-playing games like Knave and Ars Magica. Wow. I don't know if I'm as famous or as great as Ars Magica, but I appreciate it. To explore Roguelands. So neat. So it actually has a world map and it has little hexes. I don't know if you can see it very well on the video, but I guess you could use this for a hex crawl. Hexes are pretty small. Might be a little bit hard to take notes in the hexes, but I suppose you could use little symbols. Building a character. So it uses our 6 standard D&D stats, just like Knave does. And your stats start out from 1 through 4. Because in Knave, all of your stats just go from 0 to 10, basically. And you roll plus that bonus, you're trying to get a 16 usually. We have some pre-packed explorers here, just like what we saw in Cairn. If you wanted to start out being a champion or a magician, boom, it gives you right off the bat, here's your stats, here's your hit points, your AC, your inventory, here's the stuff you start with, and you're good to go. I guess you could use it for NPCs as well. If you want to pack your own bag, here are your tables to roll on. Looks like the stuff from Knave. We have the same traits that we saw in Cairn. Advancing your character. This is done by gold. So you're going to get XP through gathering gold. Gaining levels for every 1,000 XP. You gain 1 level and an update. You can increase 3 of your ability scores. And there's other ways that you can improve yourself, like improving your equipment by hiring specialists. An example of a character sheet. I really like to see that. It does help people fill in their character sheets when they can see what one would look like. Learning the game. It does have difficulty ratings down here. So in Knave, it's basically always 16 is what you're trying to roll. But this adds in some alternatives where you can just use different numbers. Magic scrolls and attuned items. It's cast through scrolls and attuned items, and the outcomes can be uncertain. Adventuring parties can typically find scrolls while exploring or buy them from common magic shops. The damage and healing impacts of magic are scaled by a character's level. Yep, that sounds like Knave. We have consumables and usage dice. So it says amounts of items like torches, spikes, and arrows are not individually tracked. The total amounts of all consumable items in your inventory are pooled together and tracked with usage dice, UD. You start with a total of UD20 consumable items. So this uses a dice chain. We've seen this in a number of different games like the Black Hack, where you roll your die, and if it is a 1 or a 2, then you bump it down to the next lowest dice. So it creates this more abstracted, randomized form of tracking equipment. It's really not my preferred way of doing it, since I don't think it adds that much. It doesn't really speed things up, in my opinion. But some people really like rolling the dice to see if their equipment has been reduced or not. So it's really just whether you like that gambling element. Using rogue magic. So we have a random table here where I think you can generate new spells, possibly for scrolls. We have all D100 spells packed onto a 2-page list. Looks like pretty much the same ones from before. Like bird person, your arms turn into huge bird wings. These are the knave spells. I don't know if any of these have been changed. We saw in Karen a few have been changed. I don't know if that's true here. The bazaar, we have some items you can buy, how to run encounters, including some ideas for role-playing and types of NPCs. One interesting note here is that it looks like the rolling in combat is all player-facing, in the sense that you would roll and try and hit monster's armor class, but when a monster attacks you, you roll plus a armor value and try and get above the monster's static attack value. That is an option that I had in Knave, and it looks like this has been made more formalized here. Monsters have these very minimalistic stat rectangles where everything is based on the hit dice of the monster. So if you have your hit dice is always going to be, let's see, your hit points is always 4 times your hit dice. Your AC is always 10 plus your hit dice. Your attack of a monster is, I think, going to be the same as their AC. Well, that's not very clear here, but I think that's true from looking at this. They have a damage number. So attack is the same as AC. And they have an amount of dice the damage dice that they roll. So a ghoul might have 3 hit dice, and that means that their AC is going to be 13. And I assume that their static attack value is also 13. Their damage is a scream, 2d4. Hit points are d12 because it's usually 4 times their hit dice. Traps and hazards, some ideas for traps and hazards here. We have some treasures and some magic items you can grab, and some rules for adventuring and hex crawling. How many hexes you can travel. One hex can be traveled per 8 hours when clearing paths or roads. Events that can happen when you wander in. Possible mishaps. Rules for food and water, hunting. Open exploration. When a party is focusing on exploring general or open locations like forests or towns, the following guideline can be used to determine events or encounters that the party may come in contact with. So we're kind of zooming in here. The first rules were just for going from hex to hex. Now this is more like exploring within a hex. And then you have detailed exploration, which would be like foot by foot exploration within a dungeon. It uses pretty standard OSR rules for that. You can move about 40 feet. Or 120 feet every 10 minutes, which, yes, makes no sense, but that's just the way that it typically works. We have danger that you can roll, so monsters, traps, detail events that show up. And we have a lot of random tables or ideas for creating unknown rooms if you don't know what's in the next room. And I like this page. This has little locations. I love the little illustrations here and the very hand-drawn look of these maps. At first, I wasn't sure if this was supposed to map onto something at the beginning. I'm not sure if it does, really. I think it could be that this is part of the map at the front, but with just more detail added. I suspect that's what's going on there, because the temptation would be to draw all over this and make it look cooler. We have a sample dungeon here that you could use to start out running the game. Fungal Throne, another dungeon. This one looks like it's a lot more loopy, a lot more loops, a lot more exploration involved here. Where you're fighting fungal caps, troglodytes, and green slimes. It looks mostly combat-based from what I can tell here, both of these dungeons. Not a lot of detail of what's going on in the rooms. It's mostly going to be relying on interacting with the creatures there. And we have a 2-page reference at the back. That's nice. That's all in one place. So if you're new to the game, you can just read these two pages, and you'll basically know what's going on. All right, so that is Rogueland. Put that back in here. And I think that's it for our zines for today. So we had 2 different Knave games, some open world exploration. We had an adventure in a space wizard's laboratory and a city at the bottom of the netherworld. Hopefully that was all interesting to you, and let me know if you want to see more videos like this where I just grab a whole bunch of zines, because there's a lot of weird stuff over there on that shelf that I haven't even taken a look through yet. So if you want to know more, just let me know. Before we go, make sure to check out the description down below where I have a link not only to Infinite Black, our sponsor for today, but also to where you can get all of these adventures and zines for yourself if you think they look cool and you want to pick one up. Special shout out to our new patrons. We've had a whole bunch of new patrons over on Patreon, including Oddcore, Matthew Fulwarski, Kos, Alex Hurst, Ken Parker, Robert Cook, Mista Gree, Colin P., Ethan Stern, Matt C., Gnurk, aka War Crimes, Nick, Larry Vieira, Ross Murtaugh, Warclad, Kimrem, Joplin Morgan, Christopher, Flivix, I tried my best with that one, Brian, Simone Canola, Emil Bovin, Matt Tews, and Roman Haynes. I'm sorry if I messed up your names. I'm trying my best. But thank you all so much for supporting the channel on Patreon and keeping this whole enterprise going. All right, that's it for today. See you guys next time. Thanks for watching.